Okay, let's talk about the Maastricht Treaty. I know, it sounds like some super dry historical document, but it's pretty much the reason Europe looks the way it does today. Seriously, this treaty is basically the blueprint for the European Union, and it totally changed how an entire continent lives, travels, and does business.
Think about it like this. Have you ever wondered why you can use the same money, the euro, in a bunch of different European countries? Or how someone from, say, Spain can just pack a bag and go live and work in Germany without a ton of paperwork? Well, the answer to all of that comes back to this one single treaty. You see, before this treaty, European countries were kind of like business partners. They had this whole community thing going, but it was mostly focused on the economy, buying and selling stuff. But a lot of leaders wanted something more, something deeper. They wanted to create a real team to make sure peace and stability would last. Now, a massive shift like this doesn't just happen overnight. It was a really long road. After decades of just basic economic teamwork, the late 80s saw all these intense talks about taking it to the next level. It took years of really tough negotiations to turn that economic club into a true political union. And it all led up to that huge signing in 1992. So, who was in on this from the start? 12 nations. On February 7, 1992, leaders from countries like France, Germany, Italy, and Spain all met up in this small Dutch city called Maastricht. And with their signatures, they officially committed their countries to a brand new, deeply connected future together. All right, so they all agreed to build this new house for Europe, but what did the blueprints actually look like? Well, the treaty laid out a whole new structure for how the European Union would actually work. The plan for this new EU house was built on what they called the three pillars. First, the economic pillar, which was all about continuing the teamwork on trade and business. Second, a common foreign policy, the idea being that Europe could speak with one powerful voice on the world stage. And third, cooperation on justice, so police and courts across different countries could work together to keep everyone safe. And inside that first economic pillar was this absolutely revolutionary idea: creating one single currency for Europe. This, of course, would eventually become the euro. The goal was to make travel and trade completely seamless. No more hassle of exchanging money every single time you crossed a border. But you can't just create a strong new currency and let everyone in without some rules. To manage this, the treaty created something called the convergence criteria. Think of it like a really strict financial health check. Before any country could start using the euro, it had to prove its economy was stable and its debt was under control. This was totally essential to make sure the new currency would be strong right from the get-go. And this wasn't just about money and politics. It was also about democracy. The treaty gave way more power to the European Parliament, which is the only part of the EU that's directly elected by the people. It brought in this thing called a co-decision process, which basically meant that for a lot of new European laws to pass, the elected parliament had to give its okay. This gave citizens a much bigger say on what was happening. Now, beyond all the new rules, the treaty did something really cool. It invented the whole concept of EU citizenship. Think of it not as a replacement for being, say, French or Polish, but as an extra layer on top. It grants you a set of powerful new rights. Let's just call them your European superpowers. And the biggest superpower of them all, the right to move and live freely in any other member country. All of a sudden, you could decide to go to another EU nation to work or to study or to retire, all without needing complicated visas or special permits. This one right has changed millions and millions of lives. So just to be super clear, you keep your national passport, you keep your national identity, but EU citizenship adds this powerful new layer of rights on top of that. And these rights apply across the entire union, like being able to vote in local elections where you live, even if it's not the country where you were born. And the benefits didn't stop there. The treaty set up common standards that affect our daily lives in so many ways. It paved the way for better protections for workers, stronger environmental laws, and safer products on the shelves in our supermarkets. It also created way more opportunities for students to study abroad through awesome exchange programs. The impact of this one treaty is just enormous, but it also introduced a really crucial safety feature, a fundamental idea that acts as a check on the EU's power, and it's still incredibly important today. It's called the principle of subsidiarity. It's a simple but really powerful rule. The EU should only step in to solve a problem if it can do it better than a national or even a local government can. This keeps decision-making as close to the people as possible and stops the EU from getting involved in things it doesn't need to. And really, that's the lasting legacy of Maastricht. It was the exact moment when a loose club of trading partners officially became a real political union. It created a shared currency, a shared citizenship, and a shared set of rules that would go on to define Europe for generations. The ideas that were signed into law in that small Dutch city over 30 years ago are still the very foundation of modern Europe, which kind of leaves us with one final thought. If this treaty built the Europe of today, what kind of agreement or what big idea is going to be needed to build the Europe of tomorrow?